Hey everybody, and welcome to pretty much the first Training Thursday of 2020. I'm excited to be here with my cup of tea. If you want to join us with a cup of tea, or if you're watching this on the replay, definitely go grab a cup of tea. I am going to have a bit of a conversation to consider today about what I learned from Elizabeth Gilbert, the author, multi-award-winning author of Eat, Pray, Love, Big Magic, and most recently, City of Girls. While everybody's joining us, I'll grab a cup of tea. Today's tea is brought to me by Peninsula Dispensary. It's one of my favorites at the moment. It's the 11 Love one. It's just so yummy and so feminine nourishment. And I got that a lot this past couple of weeks. First, starting with Nadex, and shout out to all of our lovely work peeps from Nadex. And then it continued with an amazing retreat that I went on, the Ultimate Girls Weekend Away. Girls Week Away, with Elizabeth Gilbert as the main workshop facilitator there. And I wanted to share with you guys, or my tribe, my learnings from speaking with Elizabeth and kind of taking the action that was inspired by some of the conversations she had up on stage. Hey Chanel, hey Alex, hey Katie, how you going? Hey everybody else who's just joining us. So Elizabeth Gilbert, like I was saying, is an incredible author. And one of her books is one of my top 20 reading lists for any entrepreneur or somebody who is in the creator mode or creator archetype. Now, for some people, it is a little bit difficult to read. They found it a bit hard. I've got that response back. But one of the things that she does beautifully well, and one of the things that she expanded on in the workshop, was about giving sentience to our emotions and our ideas. Now, that sounds pretty weird and wacky as well. But what it is, anyone else got their cup of tea? What it is the notion that our fears, our happiness, our enchantment, our ideas, our creativity, they're all types of muses. And if we were to give them sentience or personality and create persons of them, and this isn't new, of course, it's throughout psychology, positive psychology, and some other things. But the way that she describes it from a creativity perspective is quite extraordinary. Now, in Big Magic, she talks about ideas coming to dance with us. They want to come and play. And when they want to come and play, they want our attention. And that's amazing for an idea to come and have our attention and not somebody else's. But what you'll notice is they kind of hang out in groups. And the idea, have you ever noticed when you've had an idea and then all of a sudden you can see it everywhere? Everybody else seems to have the same idea and you feel like, oh my goodness, it can't possibly be a new idea. Ideas are the ones that it comes to you and it wants to dance with you. And through the dancing with you, you can choose to dance with it for a while, play, take action on it, create something extraordinary. Or if you ignore it because you're busy doing other things or you've got something else on or there's another project and you shelve that idea has the opportunity to go and dance with somebody else. And there is no limit of the ideas that will dance with you. They continue to come through, just not necessarily with the regularity that some of us might like. Yeah, totally, Katie. So if there's any of those notions that are going on, oh my goodness, I want to create this thing, and then all of a sudden you're seeing everybody else has created that thing. There isn't any limit to the amount of ideas that come through, and they come through and dance with you in particular so that you can have your flavor and your essence with that idea. Now, I'd read this and it was just the most profound thing that I'd ever read. At the time when I was trying to create new ideas and coming up with something that was very different. The whole Naturopreneur movement hadn't been done before. People weren't talking on a bigger scale about business and mindset in natural health. And I didn't have any people to look to model these types of things off. And I mean, there's a lot of us as feminine leaders, we don't have that, that model. There's people starting to come through, Jacinta Ardern and some others, Greta Thunberg and Malala, but there wasn't a lot of that when I was first starting up my business. And so I hadn't seen those types of things. But when an idea comes and dances with you, you have this opportunity to dance with it and see what you create. Instead of trying to make it perfect and holding on to the idea and keeping it away from everybody else, and then seeing what happens to twist that idea and it doesn't actually come to fruition, or it doesn't play with the people that you're there to bring it through with. I hope that's helpful. So not strangling your ideas, giving them sentience, playing, dancing, romanticizing them, and then seeing what you can co-create together, you and the idea. Now, that was a bit of an epiphany for me, and it was one of the reasons that I went to go and see Elizabeth Gilbert in Fiji. Now, the reason I was in Fiji in the first place was because after running NADEX last year, I realized that very much like Praccie King talked about when we were at the awards ceremony, the X Factors awards ceremony, she talked about fluffing yourself up and the importance of being the best that you can be in your cells and yourself, so that you can show up to whatever is in the room. So you can show up to the conversations that can be difficult, the conversations that can be a challenge, but you have all of yourself and your cells there at your optimum to be there to hold the space for whatever is needed in that moment. And what I realized was that I needed to do that for myself after NADEX. So I took myself off to Fiji, and I was inspired at the same time by this idea of ideas to dance with. So mid Fiji, we got to have a really in-depth workshop with Elizabeth, and one of the things that came through again was her idea of creating sentience for emotions. And one of the big ones that she created was fear. Now, she's got a quote here. And I love this. I talked about fear at the VIP day at NADEX as well, and how fear can actually be your friend. Fears, and there was a lot of crossover with what Praccie was talking about at the X Factors Awards as well. And one of those things was the notion that our fears and the way that we react to our fears versus the way that we respond to our fears. And what Praccie was talking about was often we can react or reactivate a feeling that we had when we were children in our bodies based on a fear. That fear might have been brought up because of some of the big Ds that Praccie talks about: death, disfigurement, disability, depression. These moments in time that we have a reaction. Our bodies go back into being a younger child, and our bodies will give us a feeling. And then we react quickly and unthoughtfully and unpresently by a reaction that we probably had when we were children. And in doing so, in the long term, that's not going to be as beneficial as stopping and responding. So when Praccie was talking about reacting versus responding, and responding takes you into a place that you haven't ever been before. It's a new place, whereas reacting takes you back to where you were when you were a child, or the last time you felt that way, because it's stored within your cells and yourself. Whereas responding takes you on a different trajectory. And what Elizabeth was talking about was fear will not let you do anything where the outcome isn't certain. And the thing about our past is it's certain. We have reasons to believe that this will be the same result as what happened before because we've seen it, and so there is certainty. Whereas a future that we haven't been privy to yet isn't certain. And our ability to respond takes us into a new place, a place that we haven't been to yet. And so I loved the merging of both Praccia's discussion around reactivity and responding, and the fear discussion with Elizabeth around not being able to be outside of our boundary of certain. And so to take that a step further, we started talking about fear, and just like the ideas, what would happen if fear came and sat at a table with you and you were in yourself, having an ability to respond, having an ability to be fluffed up, having an ability to be the most relaxed you could be. And instead of fear being inside you, what would happen if those fears were sitting across the table from you? And now, kind of playing with that idea and the notion that fear is probably something that's happened in the past, or a reaction we've had to something that's happened in the past. One of the things that Elizabeth does daily is writes a letter from fear to herself. She also writes one from love to herself, which is the kind of balance out there. And to get fear outside of us takes the reactivity away, and we have an ability to respond. So what are some of the biggest fears that you have around your business and life and the success of your business, or what you hope to achieve for your life, what you want to contribute? And what are some of the fears around your health, your well-being? If you start to consider some of those fears, and if you were to actually give them sentience into a person in front of you in your mind's eye, if fear was sitting in front of you, what would fear actually tell you that fear was afraid of? Your fear. What would your fear tell you you were afraid of? And if you are brave enough right now, I'd love to hear it in the comments, because some of my biggest fears were around dying, because 2019 and 2020 have been epic years for taking lives. There has seemed to be so many in our community, and so many people in our community affected by somebody directly passing over, that it's starting to be something that's in my world a lot more prevalent than it was before. And so I started to notice that some of my fears, that if fear was sitting in front of me, would say, I'm afraid of not fulfilling my potential before I die. I'm afraid of flying a helicopter and having something like Kobe Bryant's accident happen to me and my family. I'm afraid of not sharing my message with the world to create the impact that I'm making before I die. I'm afraid, and then there's afraid of loss. I'm afraid of losing my family. I'm afraid of losing my tribe. I'm afraid of losing my connections. I'm afraid of losing my health. I'm afraid of losing. And then, of course, we get into these conversations around, I'm afraid of failing. I'm afraid of being out of money. I'm afraid of success. I'm afraid of being alienated. I'm afraid of there not being enough time. There's so many universal fears. And if you are listening, I'm sharing all this with you. If you want to send a like button for any of those that you noticed that I just said that you would say to. Any of those fears of failure, of not being able to make it, not being able to make enough money, not being able to share your message before you pass, not being on the right track, not being able to contribute to your family, and possibly even a fear of death. And there are people that have different fears as well. But there seems to be a bit of a universal consciousness around similar fears. And the humanity that we have is that these fears are always there. But if we were to sit across the table from fear, and it was to express, just like we do with some of our clients, and they sit across the table from us and they express. We don't take that stuff on. We let them express those fears. We let them express what's happening. And we be with that in that moment so that it can be aired and something else can come through. Something new and different can come through. Because until those things are expressed, then something new and different doesn't have the opportunity to come through because it's holding everything in there before it comes out. So then there is, oh, that's a big one. Sorry, I'm just reading the messages here. So Katie, I constantly play with the fear of burnout and my work not being enough. Absolutely. I totally hear you on that. I'm afraid of fucking up, being a parent. I'm afraid of money running out. I'm afraid of letting loved ones down, from Alison. These are not things that we are by ourselves in. Absolutely every single parent, even from the moment of conception, every mother I've spoken to has had fears around being a parent. And I absolutely have. And these things are universal. These things are there all the time. And we don't talk about them and we don't let them be expressed, yet they sit in the background. This is what Elizabeth was talking about. And she had the privilege and the honor and the challenge of being there when her partner Rhea passed last year from cancer. And what she talked about was being in the room with fear and just being there, not fixing it, not changing it, but letting it be there. And what happens when fear is just heard and let to be there is that love comes into the room. And we heard exactly the same thing from Praccie King when she was speaking at the X Factor Awards as well, is what do you say in some of these moments? As long as those fears are then heard and they have a way of coming out, and Praccie talked about writing and screaming and speaking and journaling and all of these ways in which they come out, what happens when they've come out is that love gets to come into the room. And this is the thing, when we express these things either through journaling, which is what we did with Elizabeth Gilbert, then we have the opportunity for love to come in. And then what does love have to say? And so if love and enchantment and joy and all of those types of sensations of being present, and that was the difference and the distinction that was made, is that love and enchantment is a presence. You know, I feel it when I'm holding my son, my youngest son, as he goes to sleep. I'm so present to love being in the room. So present to love being in the room. I feel it when I've sat across the table from some of my clients that have had a diagnosis or have had somebody pass or have gone into remission or have had a recovery. There's a presence, not anywhere else. There's a presence in being there in that space. And I've had it in the most smallest of moments as well. When I've seen the sunrise in Bali, when I've ridden a scooter through the middle of the rainforest as rain starts falling and there's a tingle in the air. And I felt it when I was looking up at the stars on the beach in Vanuatu when we were giving back. And in those moments, that sensation, Liz talked about it and described it as enchantment, because it's easy to say happy and it has such different connotations. And love can also have different connotations, but enchantment is that moment that you're so present to that sensation. And if you're thinking about these things right now, I'm inviting you to take a little second to write down, when was the last time you felt enchantment? When's something that comes to mind when you feel enchanted and in that moment so present to whatever it happens to be, however you would describe that, God, the universe, yourself, your higher self, in that moment, how could you create that into a sentient being sitting across from you at the table? And then if that sentient being of enchantment was to write you a letter, what would they write to you? So fear generally writes, I'm afraid of. But enchantment writes, I love it when we. And the interesting, beautiful thing, and I would totally invite you to do this. Elizabeth does this every day in her journal with images and with photographs and with, she uses a glue stick to stick her bits and pieces on. And I love that creativity. And what she notices is once fear has gotten out of the way and enchantment comes in and love is in there, it sets her up in a really different perspective for the day. And since I've been doing this, a similar thing has been happening. Creativity flows and you start to notice because you've paid attention. I'm a big believer of where your attention goes, energy flows. And so when you're paying attention to enchantment, enchantment shows up. More of it. When you're paying attention to creativity, creativity and ideas start popping up. When you're paying attention to money and abundance, more of it shows up. And so in writing, I love when we have an amazing cup of tea in my special cup. I love when we, and this is from enchantment sitting across from you. I love when we have a full bath bomb in the bath. I love when we have one of those aha moment conversations with a mentee and there feels like a visceral moment and time stands still and everything is just meant to be. I love it when we are at the top of a mountain breathing in deep. I love it when we are watching a sunrise or a sunset. Now, some of these things have an overarching theme like nature, but many of the things that bring you enchantment are very unique to you. I love it when I'm on the scooter with my son right next to me and we're going down a hill and he has this huge smile on his face and all my cells feel totally alive and I am super excited to actually have wind going through my hair. It's an amazing, amazing enchanted feeling. And so my invitation to you is, what do you notice about enchantment in your life? What's the last time you felt enchantment? And what would enchantment say to you if he was sitting across from you and describing to you what they wanted more of? Because what enchantment does is brings you more presence. It brings you here now. It brings you seeing the magic that's happening around you. It brings you attention and focus on things that truly matter in that moment. And it brings you a sense of presence and relaxation. And that was the last thing that I definitely took away from Elizabeth Gilbert, is she described the most powerful person in the room. And she's been in the room with Oprah Winfrey. She's been in the room with powerful, mind-changing people. She's been in rooms with politicians. She's been in rooms with some of the most greatest people or successful people on the planet. And she said, it isn't the power of somebody's will. It isn't the power of their money. It isn't the power of their fame. It isn't the power of their success. The most powerful person in the room is the most relaxed person in the room. Because, like Praccie said, creating from a space where your nervous system is nourished, making decisions with what Praccie describes, I had to write it down, is the ability to embrace every moment, regardless of its challenges, with a quiet mind and an open heart. The ability to embrace every moment, regardless of its challenges, with a quiet mind and an open heart. That's the most powerful person in the room. And what I feel and what I got the sense of in doing this, and this is the thing, this is the thing about Training Thursdays, and that if you haven't joined in on these, or if you had in the past and you haven't kind of taken action on them, they're all about taking the action. That's what we learn in NADX. That's what we learn in my programs. If you do this through the experience, you will gain wisdom through the experience of this. So I'm inviting you to write a letter from fear, and then I'm inviting you to write a letter from enchantment. And I'm inviting you to consider, how you can embrace, how can you hear the fears but not buy into them? And how can you embrace the enchantment to be more present and nourish your nervous system to be able to create whatever you are here to truly create in the world? How can you create healing for yourself first and then healing for others? How can you create a relaxed, most powerful position to be in the room for your business? How can you do that as a parent? How can you do that as a family member? How can you do that as part of your community? And how can you do it on a global scale with your interactions on social media or otherwise? How can you harness those moments so that you can work from your best self and cells to be a benefit to everybody around you in that ripple effect that we're all continuing to look for? So they are my insights. Beautiful. Oh, it's so great to hear. So great to hear some of the insights. Katie loves whipping around Indonesia on bikes with her family, feeling freedom and fullness. I love that. Alison loves the feeling in the morning when you walked onto the beach with your fur babies. Oh my goodness. Any fur baby, there's enchantment in fur babies. All high fives to all the fur baby mums out there. After a storm, there's so many very unique moments in nature, isn't there, with enchantment? Admiring changes of the sand and rocks and debris. So true. And if you are just listening and you're not popping that down, like I said, I invite you to really explore this. Have conversations around this. The more you have a conversation around this, and the more actions will take place around this, and things get to change through the action, through conversation. So they're my 3 biggest takeaways from both Elizabeth and Praccie on how do you create sentience with ideas and play with them and dance with them and not feel lack when they disappear? How do you create sentience from fear and enchantment and take the action of actually writing? Take time to actually write and connect with your fears and write and connect with your enchantment. And lastly, how can you be the most relaxed person in the room and create that ripple effect that you're here to create? I love you guys. I'm looking forward to having more of these chats on Training Thursdays, and you can catch the replay on YouTube and subscribe to YouTube so you don't miss any. Otherwise, you'll catch them on my blog as a little written up actionable. All right, I'll catch you guys next week for another Training Thursday. Bye.